right, so let's jump right into the issues. You have discussed on your political page that you want to ban addictive social media platforms. What qualifies?
In kids.
For
yes.
kids
Very
under
critical.
16.
Very critical.
What would addictive look like? What does that mean for you?
Yeah, so any use of algorithms to tailor content via a social media platform, that's what's in scope for me. If you're a kid under the age of 16, you shouldn't be using it. And I think that that's a very consistent standard we've used for addictive cigarettes in this country. You can't smoke an addictive cigarette until the age of 18. You shouldn't be using an addictive social media platform at the age of 15. Same thing goes for an addictive drink of alcohol. The research would actually show that, brain development, it's only at a place by the age of 16 where you can actually even withstand some of the effects of TikTok or addictive social media today. And, a lot of libertarians might say, and I used to call myself a libertarian too, I still have strong libertarian instincts, might say that, isn't that an encroachment on the free market? Here's where that misses. Kids aren't the same as adults. So I believe adults should be free to make whatever decisions they want to, certainly including social media usage on that list. But kids aren't adults, and that's why I come out where I do.
And so let's say, hypothetically, you make it to the White House and you decide that we do need to ban certain social media for under 16 Americans. Who's going to make those choices? Is it you? Is it members of Congress?
So that's actually, I'm very clear about what has to be done via executive order in the president without asking Congress for permission, what needs to be done with Congress's permission by statute, and then what's left to the states. This is one that will be done through Congress. This requires statutes to be able to pass, just like we have. Just in the same way cigarettes are outlawed below the age of 18, so we need to use that same framework. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. That's what this is about.
And you are the founder of a pharmaceutical company. So what are you going to do to make pharmaceuticals more accessible, such as insulin?
Great question. Big problem in this country. The number one obstacle to bringing down the costs of innovative medicines in this country is the FDA. The FDA makes it far too burdensome and far too expensive to develop a new medicine in ways that are totally unnecessary because of that bureaucracy. I've seen it firsthand. I think that reforming the FDA brings down the cost of drug development, creates a much more competitive marketplace for people developing innovative medicines. That actually is going to be the most effective way to bring down the cost of innovative medicines. Generics is another story. There's some other market structure failures there. But for innovative medicines, that's actually the answer.
And I was looking at your website about all of your issues that you
Yes.
stand behind, and one of the things you've talked about is getting rid of the Department of Education.
Yes.
Where would you redirect those concerns? Where would you redirect the things that they currently covered?
So actually, much of that is just wasted money. $83 billion a year spent on an administrative agency that really shouldn't exist because education is administered locally in our country. So I would take the majority of that and use it to cover any deficits for school choice programs across the country. School choice is very popular in any state where it's been delivered, especially even in poorer communities that are actually liberated by those programs. The number one objection is that it's underfunded. Well, guess what? The federal government can actually be a place to fill that gap by dissolving the Department of Education. Also, we've done the math on this. For 25% of their $83 billion budget, we could put 3 armed security guards in every school across this country. Okay, that's how you protect our children. I think it is unconscionable that we have school shootings in this country. You want to protect our children, that's how you do it.
Now, you've also talked about being a proud gun owner. You spoke at the NRA. What needs to happen for mental health then? Because you've said it's a mental health concern. What needs to happen for mental health when you get into office?
I think we need to address the mental health epidemic starting in kids. That's a big part of where my social media platform comes in. You don't hear that from either party right now. My position with respect to social media in youth. That's one example of a broader conversation, especially weaving into education. I think a big part of what we see, even in the rise of radical gender ideology in our schools, is fueling a mental health epidemic that otherwise would not have existed. So I think that we need to get to the root causes of helping kids in this country who are crying out for help. Okay, they're asking for help. We're not actually answering the call. As adults, it's up to us to lead the way by actually filling the void of purpose that kids of every age have, right? I'm a millennial. I'm the first millennial candidate to run for president. People in Gen Z and younger, people our age and younger. The thing that we're hungry for is a cause, purpose, meaning. At a moment when we've lost faith, family, hard work, country, belief in being a citizen of this country. I think once we fill that void of purpose, we're actually going to see, I think, a lot of let's just say, turning down the temperature on that mental health epidemic that's raging across our country like wildfire. I think that combine that with even a culture of free speech where people feel free to speak their minds, free to express themselves openly again. I think that's our path, especially amongst young people, out of the mental health epidemic.
You talk about purpose, and a lot of kids find purpose in school programs, after school programs, all sorts of things, all funded by revenues that come from the Department of Education. So how are you going to supplement that?
Well, I think a lot of that should be best redirected locally. I mean, that comes from taxes that people pay to the federal government. That can also be a redirected funding back to the states. I think it's an inefficient run through the federal government. I think it also applies a top-down curricular mandate that I don't think is good for local schools. It actually fights into competition in the marketplace of ideas for how we educate our kids. So, actually, it surprises people too. It's only less than 10% of the budget that's actually funded for most public schools by money that comes from the federal government, but they use that as a cudgel, as a sort of handcuff that gets those schools to have to adopt these toxic ideologies. I think to the contrary, if we use that to help bolster otherwise underfunded or potentially underfunded school choice programs, that's going to be a much better use of the money to actually educate the next generation of Americans.
Last question I got for you is, you've spoken about hollow college degrees and wanting to incentivize trade schools, yet you have received 2 degrees from Ivy League schools. So where does this come from?
So I think there's multiple paths that should be available. I actually believe in the value of a good classical liberal arts education. That was my path to success. My path cannot be the only path, though. I think that's the real problem in our country. We need plural paths to dignity, respect, and advancement in this country. We also have a worker shortage. I mean, I think you could actually realize the American dream maybe more effectively without going through a 4-year college degree that burdens you with debt if you have skills that I wouldn't have been as successful at a trade school because I didn't have the kind of skill sets that would have allowed me to succeed as a carpenter or a mechanic. But people who do have that skill set shouldn't be denied those opportunities because our educational system tilts the scales. So what I say is I'm not decrying people who do choose 4-year college degrees. It's not an either or. What I think is we need to open up more paths to success. And we talk a lot about in our campaign about the new American dream. That's a big part of the new American dream to me is that, yes, I'm proud of my path. It allowed me to succeed. I'm grateful for it and the opportunities that I was given. But my path can't be the only path. And I'm unapologetic about that.
Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah.